Hello, I'm Avis Kalfsbeck, and this is the Peace is Here podcast. Welcome to Peacewarts, School of Peacecraft and Inquiry, where we practice the skills of peace through short classes. We take the peace work seriously, but not ourselves. If you're joining us mid-school year, you're not late. Orientation begins at episode 198. Welcome back, Peace Scholars. This is Chronicled Courage 101 in the Hall of Records, where we keep our eyes on the evidence. Today we look at the attempt to pull the brake on the concept of war itself. We are studying the General Treaty for Renunciation of War as an instrument of national policy, more commonly known as the Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928. We have today a new world, a world in which the outlawry of war is the new law of nations. Aristide Briand, French Foreign Prime Minister, upon the signing of the pact in Paris, August 27, 1928. Let's walk over to our classroom shelves and look at a few of the standard textbooks on peace and history. What we find is that the Kellogg-Briand Pact is almost universally framed like a foolish dream that failed because World War II happened anyway. You will see the word naive or utopian used to describe its authors. These books focus on the failure of implementation, yet they completely erase the why, the fact that this was a global, grassroots demand from millions of people who were done with the legitimacy of slaughter. By ignoring how this pact provided the literal legal grounds for the Nuremberg trials, these textbooks take the fruit of the tree while calling the roots a failure. But in this department, we look closer. We see that the pact was a massive structural shift in the living architecture of the world. It succeeded in changing the legal rights and power structures around war. History. Before 1928, war was a perfectly legal way for a country to conduct business. It was considered a sovereign right. If a nation wanted a piece of territory or felt insulted, it could legally declare war, and any land it conquered became its legal property. The invention of a crime. The Kellogg-Briand Pact changed the rules of the game by making war an international crime. This wasn't the first time such an idea had been proposed. Philosophers like Immanuel Kant in the late 1700s had argued for perpetual peace through a federation of free states, and activists like Salmon Levinson, a Chicago lawyer who spent years refining the outlawry movement, had campaigned for this for a decade. But 1928 was the first time this philosophy was written into international law, signed by nearly every nation in the world, including the United States, France, Germany, and Japan. The pact saw these nations agree that they would never again use war as an instrument of national policy. The removal of the legal shield. By outlawing war, the architects of this pact removed the legal shield of the conqueror. This meant that for the first time in human history, might makes right was no longer a valid legal argument. We teach this as a fundamental logistical shift. You cannot build a durable peace on a foundation where the very act of destruction is considered a legitimate tool of statecraft. The persistence of the architecture. While the pact did not prevent World War II, it provided the legal meat for the Nuremberg and Tokyo trials. When the leaders of the Axis powers were put on trial, they were charged with crimes against peace. That charge was only possible because of the Kellogg-Briand Pact. Thesis: The architecture under pressure. The Pact's core principle, that territory and power gained through war are not legally recognized, is currently facing its ultimate stress test in the headlines of 2026. The specifics of the operation. On January 3, 2026, under the direction of President Trump, U.S. Special Operations Forces conducted Operation Absolute Resolve, a pre-dawn raid on Caracas. They captured Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores from their compound and flew them to New York City. As of the date of this recording, they are currently being held in the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, in Brooklyn. The administration justifies this as a law enforcement action based on narco-terrorism rather than an act of war. The enforcement of legitimacy. While the U.S. has physically removed the leader, the Kellogg-Briand architecture and the UN Charter that grew from it creates a massive legal wall. Because international law does not recognize the right of capture or the right to replace a sovereign head of state by force, the world remains in a state of legal friction. This is why Maduro's lawyers are currently arguing in a Manhattan federal court that he has sovereign immunity. Even with the president and first lady in a New York jail, the law of 1928 acts as a ghost in the machine, making it nearly impossible for the U.S. to achieve the legal quiet needed to govern or trade Venezuela's resources. You may be wondering, is this why Trump is saying he's buying Greenland and not just taking it? The commercial override. This is exactly why the conversation around Greenland is framed as a real estate transaction. Under the post-1928 architecture, if the United States were to simply seize Greenland by force, the act would be a crime against peace. No international bank would finance projects there, and no nation would recognize the deed. By insisting on a purchase, the administration is attempting to use contract law to bypass territorial integrity. They are seeking a legal title that the Kellogg-Briand Pact made impossible to get through a sword. It proves that even the most powerful nations now understand that a purchase agreement is a more durable shield than an invading army. However, forcing a sale that Greenland's people do not want to become part of the United States certainly seems an act of war. In the Hall of Records, we must acknowledge that when a transaction is backed by the implicit threat of force rather than the consent of the governed, the line between a contract and a conquest disappears. The courage of 1928 was the courage to renounce the right of the sword. Force is a temporary tool, but law is a permanent structure. The pen of the past is currently holding the line against the sword of the present. Your homework. 1. Look up the Stimson Doctrine and find out how it used the logic of the Kellogg-Briand Pact to respond to the 1931 invasion of Manchuria. 2. Write down one question about any of this episode's topics. If you don't have a question, just write no question. 3. Optional. Journal. Think about a right you feel you have in conflict, the right to be angry or the right to have the last word. What would it look like for you to outlaw that behavior as an instrument of your personal policy? The ink of the future. In the Department of Chronicled Courage, we believe that idealists of the past are often just the architects of the future who are brave enough to start drawing. The record shows that when we watch the news out of the New York courts or listen to the debates over the Greenland purchase, the legal friction remains the primary obstacle to unilateral power. It is difficult for any superpower to simply move the borders of the world when the foundational laws of 1928 say they have no right to do so. Those signatures made sure that war would never again be called justice. Until next class, keep your eyes on the evidence. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to support the Pieces Here podcast, the most helpful way is to follow it wherever you're listening. It helps share the message with others. You can also support this piece work at my Patreon for $4 a month, about what a used paperback goes for these days. Just go to Patreon at patreon.com/Avis Kalfsbeck. That's AVISKALFSBEEK. My most recent book is Mana Mutante, a best friend eco-fiction novella about food systems, featuring Tilly, Camas, Pedro, and the rest of the gang. It's book 6 in the Pedro the Water Dog Saves the Planet series and is available wherever you buy books. You can find all of my peace projects and stay in touch at aviskalfsbeck.com. Music is by Javier Peque Rodriguez. Sound effects are from Pixabay. Regarding peace, we need not delay or despair. We are not late. We are right on time to love. We are all scholars of peace. Listen for the peace.